Hello everyone, today we are going to go through how to set up our Raspberry Pi with Raspberry Pi Imager. Our Raspberry Pi takes a micro SD card, therefore we need an SD card adapter in order to put it in our computer. If your computer doesn't have a SD card slot, you will need an SD card adapter that will plug into a USB. I have an SD card slot, so I'm just going to put my SD card adapter into my computer. The first thing we do is download our Raspberry Pi Imager off the Education 3752 website. We go through the download process, and then once it's downloaded, we open the file. Once we open our Raspberry Pi Imager, we select the OS system that we want to use. We are going to use the Raspberry Pi OS 32-bit. Next, we choose the SD card that we want to put our Imager information on. Now I don't have an SD card in my computer, but it should show up here. Once this is done, we make sure that all of our information is on the SD card and then eject the SD card to make sure that no errors occur. Now let's do a basic introduction of our Raspberry Pi device. This is the Ethernet port. These are the USB ports. These are the GPIO pins. This is the audio port. This is the Type-C power supply. This is the HDMI mini ports. This is the camera port. This is the micro SD port. All of these parts of our Raspberry Pi allow it to function as a computer. To start it off, we're going to lay our Raspberry Pi in the second layer of our case. Notice how I have the first two layers of my box on along with my screws. The screws are here to make it easier to line up the case layers. Now we keep adding on our case layers until we get to the one with a missing side by the GPIO ports. When you get here, you're going to add on your ribbon cables. In order to do this, make sure that this block is pointing inwards into your device. Next, line up your pins with the holes and apply even pressure onto your ribbon cable. Now we finish assembling our case. Now I add my nuts onto the screws and screw them into place. You can be very delicate with this since they're only plastic. Your Raspberry Pi should now look something like this. Your T-cobbler looks like the device shown here. Now we are going to connect the T-cobbler to the breadboard. In order to do this, we line up the pins with the hole and apply even pressure to the pins. Now we are going to take the other side of your ribbon cable and connect it to the T-cobbler. In order to connect our T-cobbler and our ribbon cable, we make sure that this bump lines up with the slot in the T-cobbler. Line your pins up with the holes and apply even pressure. Your finished Raspberry Pi should look something like this. Now we start connecting all of our cords. The power cord is what we do last. Here, I am connecting my mini HDMI port to the Raspberry Pi and connecting the other side into my monitor. Here, I am connecting my keyboard and mouse to the USB slots. Lastly, you connect your Type-C power cord. You turn on your monitor and then turn on the device with this button. What your desktop should look like after opening your Raspberry Pi. In the top left-hand corner, if you click the Raspberry, a toggle comes down with information on programming, internet, sound and video, graphics, accessories, and much more. Under accessories, you have stuff like screenshot and your terminal. When our Raspberry Pi is set up, we're going to type this into our terminal to make sure that it is updated all the way. Then we're going to go into recommended software under preferences and pick what we need for this course. So for this course, we're using VNC Viewer, we are using Scratch and Thonny Python. Lastly, we're going to go under Preferences and then Raspberry Pi Configuration, and we're going to set our interfaces that we need. So we're going to enable camera, we're going to enable SSH, we're going to enable VNC, and we're going to enable remote GPIO so we can do our physical coding. And that's all we needed to do to set up our Raspberry Pi. From here, we're good to go with the rest of the course.